Wide receiver analyst calls out Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver Diontae Johnson, saying that he's a bonehead, a player making boneheaded plays. So, with Diontae Johnson on the team, he's one of the more controversial players on the Pittsburgh Steelers when you think about it. Because even though he's shown flashes of being a really good player in this league, and we liked what he came out of when he came out of Toledo in the 3rd round, and we thought he could be one of the best, then his catch rate, people really turn on him, saying that he drops the ball too much, and that sometimes he runs backwards when he catches the ball. Last year, at 0 touchdowns. So, even though he's a pure route runner, one of the best in the league, he's one of the more controversial players for the Pittsburgh Steelers fans to target when things don't go right for the offense. So, now let's go back to Matt Herman, because he said on the Reception Perception podcast, he's a wide receiver analyst around the league, and he has his own YouTube channel where he basically only breaks down wide receivers. He said this. Here was his quote. Diontae Johnson is not an elite player. He's actually a pretty flawed player in some ways. I mean, you mentioned that drop stuff, and that it's not nearly as big of a problem as it was in the 2020 season, when he had observed drop rate, and it was just a lot of that kind of stuff on these short little routes. You're going to get blasted. Those where most drops occurs. So there was a little bit of kind of chicken and egg sort of thing there. The yards after catch stuff, where he's like, get going downfield, pal. When you got the ball in your hands, he's pretty high on the boneheaded play scale. So, that was his quote. And I want to make a specific video about Diontae Johnson and why all the narratives around him is wrong, and this upcoming season he's going to be fantastic. But let me just talk about it a little bit in this video before I make a separate video. So with Diontae Johnson's flaws, it's been well documented over the years. When you look at him for his career, he had a career 13 drops back in 2020 and has had a few ultimately drops over the years as well. Still, Herman on the podcast does not mention that drops aren't sticky of a stat, as Johnson is near the top target earners in the NFL, meaning that he gets targeted a lot, and even though he drops the ball, he's one of the lowest people to drop the ball for as much targets that he gets. That's why even though he has a lot of drops, it still does not equate to a high drop rate based off the targets. For example, he had 7 drops on 147 targets last season, coming to a drop rate of 4.8% total. Drop rate. And just to put that into some perspective for you, when looking at Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins last season, he had a total of 8 drops and 170 targets this past season, coming to a drop rate of 4.7%, which is nearly identical to Johnson. So he had one more drop and a lot of targets. Sometimes you look at the drops and it's based off the timing of the drops. That's why people get so angry with him. It's not necessarily when you look at the whole picture of it, the drops in total, because when he does drop the ball, he drops it in the worst situation possible. He just doesn't drop it on a no-name down and a down that you could kind of throw away. Even though all downs are important, some downs it's just like, okay, you drop the ball, you could get it back. But he always drops it in the worst situations. I get that part. But just in an overall perspective, compared to other wide receivers' targets and other receivers around the league, his drop rate is not that high. But I also understand when Herman mentioned the thing about Diontae Johnson running backwards. That really only started this year to negatively affect the team. In the past years, even when you look at Antonio Brown, sometimes Antonio Brown would catch the ball, run backwards to get more of an angle to run upfield, and he would be able to capitalize on that. So it all depends on the defender guarding you. But with Diontae Johnson, he was just not able to get around the defender this season. In past seasons, he was able to get around and get the outside edge and run backwards to get upfield more. You look at other wide receivers around the league, Tyreek Hill does that a lot as well. But we see Diontae Johnson do that, and it negatively affects the team last season. But in past seasons, he was actually really good at yards after catch. But this past season, like I said, his yards after catch was one of the worst in his career. So now I'm just going to address him being called a boneheaded player. Because when you look at him around the league and you see other wide receivers do certain stuff, They do stern stuff. They don't get labeled this. But because Steelers fans label him as a player that's kind of controversial to the team, and kind of these analysts say the exact same thing, he's not a boneheaded player. Does he drop the ball sometimes? Yes. Does he run backwards sometimes? Yes. But other wide receivers, like I just mentioned, Tyreek Hill, he does it all the time. Yes, Tyreek Hill and Diontae Johnson, Tyreek Hill's way levels above Diontae Johnson, but I'm just talking about players in specific. When you look at their games, a lot of players run backwards to get field to get the edge. A lot of players drop the ball. So Diontae Johnson doing it, he gets called a boneheaded player. That just doesn't make sense. If you're going to call him a boneheaded player, call Tyreek Hill a boneheaded player as well. Don't have two ways on it. And you're a wide receiver analyst. He says that Diontae Johnson is a flawed player, and also he's not elite. If you're saying he's not elite now, I hope last season in 2021 with Ben Roethlisberger's final year, you were giving him praise because he had 107 receptions for 1,161 yards and 8 touchdowns. I hope that season you were giving him praise because he showed out. And you have to look at the quarterbacks he's been playing with. I'll touch on this more in my next video about him and why all the narratives around him is wrong, but you have to look at the quarterbacks he's been with in his career. He's not been dealt a good hand out of the top quarterbacks. He has not played with one of the top quarterbacks in the league. If you put him on a team, even though I don't want to get rid of him, just say you were to put him on a team who actually throws the ball down the field or utilizes their wide receivers to their advantage. Just say, for example, San Francisco, Kansas City, the Bills, teams like that who actually use his route running to his advantage. He'll get so many more yards, he'll get so many more touchdowns because he creates one of the best separations on his routes of any wide receiver in the league. His separation on his routes are fantastic. So you would have to assume if he was playing with a better quarterback who's not in his rookie season or not in his last season in the NFL or not in his rookie season again, you have to assume that he would actually be putting up numbers in this league and be one of the top wide receivers and actually be looked at as a top wide receiver. But because he's not, because of his quarterback play in general and the offense he's in general, his offensive coordinator, he's not been dealt a good hand and he's not been able to show out and be able to be a top wide receiver in this league. And he's doing a fantastic job in despite of all of that. I know some of you as fans have been saying in the comment section of my videos about Diontae Johnson that we need to trade him and get rid of him on the team and kind of turn it over and get some other kind of guys in the wide receiver room. But from my perspective is, I really like Diontae Johnson and I think he could be one of the best in the NFL if the quarterback situation and the offense gets right. When you look at Diontae Johnson, who would have thought him being selected in the 3rd round of Toledo, a small school like that he would have been the wide receiver he is today, that he would have been the number 1 wide receiver on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Diontae Johnson is a relentless worker, having made himself into a quality wide receiver in the NFL and one of the top in the league, and he got paid so last season for it. However, he isn't immune, just like anyone else, from his slip-ups, whether that's running backwards, losing yards, or dropping the ball. But just looking at other players around the league, he falls into the same category as him. That's why I made this video about Matt Herman calling out Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver Diontae Johnson for being a boneheaded player, because him calling him out specifically doesn't make sense. Call out other players who do the exact same thing, who are top wide receivers in this league as well. His drop rate is not bad. Since the 2020 season, his drop rate has not been bad, and he's been actually a solid player, even though the touchdowns and the production has not shown it. So, all in all, I'm going to make a video soon about Diontae Johnson more in depth as to the reason why his production just has not been there. I want to cover it more in depth about why all the talking around his name has been bad, but it's not really deserved. I'm going to make a video about that, but that's the end of this video. And let me know down in the comments below. How do you feel about Diontae Johnson and Matt Herman, a wide receiver analyst, talking about him, saying that he's a boneheaded player, making boneheaded plays, and he's not an elite wide receiver in this league? Do you agree with him? Do you not agree with him? Do you like Diontae Johnson being on this roster, or do you want to get rid of him? Let me know your thoughts on him as a whole wide receiver person in general. Also, let me know down in the comments below if you want me to make a specific video about a certain player you want to be covered, or a team aspect in general. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel down below as well if you like Steelers content, analysis, and reports. Like the video, turn on post notifications down below for this channel as well, so you get notified whenever I post the next Steelers video. Click the bell down below so you get notified. And also, training camp is only 2 days away, meaning there's going to be a lot of news to talk about in the coming weeks. This is the last Sunday without NFL football, meaning that there's going to be a lot to talk about, a lot to cover, and this is the best spot for you to get updated with everything Pittsburgh Steelers football. So, like I said, like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on notifications on, and I'm covering it all for you guys. And I'll see you guys all later. Till next time, I'm out. Peace.